Hello, everybody. This is Jim Ransom with another episode of Morning Jim Poetry. This is our weekly reading of poems by a wide variety of poets, but today it's going to be me again. I'm the poet that you had last week as well, and that's because I'm working on a book. It's just about ready to send to the publisher, and I want to share some of the poems with you before they get out to the publisher. This first one is called Brothers. Oh, let me back up and say that the poems today are taken from a section of the book called War and More, and you'll be able to see why this particular poem might fit that heading. Brothers, for he remembered that they were but flesh, a breath that goes forth and does not return. That's an epigram taken from Psalm 78 in the Bible. Frank had 2 sons, and they came 10 years apart, offspring of 2 wives, both deciding they could not tolerate life on the prairie, with the clawing wind and the fires sweeping that dry grass in the winter. The boys stayed with Frank, but like their mothers, both wandered with the world away from the thunder and sudden lightning, the smoke-belching tractor, the charging clippity-clop of the haymower was like. When the oldest left, a draftee in the Korean War, one of the few with an excited smile on his face, the younger brother was jealous and also sad that he had to stay on the farm with Frank. He never came back, the older brother, not given to receiving or writing letters. Phoned once before he shipped off, then missing in action, nothing but memories for his half-brother and for Frank. In 10 years, the younger brother was drafted and could have had a deferment, but smiled like his older brother to be going to new places, any place being his choice other than the farm. Frank's life did not change, except he worked harder, taking on his own work and the work of both boys, as he saw it. And there were always more wars. Vietnam was the next one. His son, a pilot now, had been home, and Frank felt a strange sensation. Was it pride? The boy seemed happy, whatever that is. Frank was confused at the thought. Calf pulling, sweating, hay baling, and greasing the power takeoff were things he understood. But it was no surprise when the young one turned up missing in Vietnam. Shot down, the telegram from the Air Force said. Dead or a prisoner of war, could not be determined. For Frank, life still stayed the same. The mothers of the boys called and asked for details. So he told them that the lightning, thunder, the clawing wind, and yes, the endless prairie waited for his attention. The next poem from this chapter of the book called War and More is titled Coming to Greece, and it was inspired by a newspaper photo that I saw of a boat full of refugees from the Holy Land who were photographed coming to the coast of Greece several years ago. One of them is smiling oddly, sitting there at the prow of the boat, eyes turned to one side. These eyes of fear or joy. Is this island more starvation, or the end or the beginning of salvation? A civilization once began near Athens at the high Acropolis and spread ideas, not people, to the Antipodes. These dark-eyed men in tatters, do they have a message that matters? The boats that bring them across the wine-dark Odyssean seas are steered by stoic Turks who care not where these passengers end their voyage or their lives, or which one lives or which one dies. These boats make silent ripples coming as they do from Armageddon, which is why on quiet nights Chiron is the boatman. As these people from the world's dark core approach the misty outlines of another shore, unwelcome refugees from war and death dare to embarrass us with all their needs, dressed in logo t-shirts Levi's donated at a Goodwill store, Chinese flip-flops, and fight pneumonia with sweet cough drops. They've heard that somewhere far to the north of the prophet's known land, there is a country of aging people dressed in loden, where food is not a rumor but a fact, and houses sit unbombed with roofs intact. And so they'll go there, or anywhere for food and money or women, and seek to find those others like themselves who speak the language of the prophets, and find a mullah who believes this northern land belongs to Allah. And here they come, where freedom, squeezed from gruesome wars, was won with awful cost of blood and gold. Freedom, a word outside their language, killed in droves by those where they did dwell. They'll now live restless with the infidel. That was an interesting poem to write, as I can imagine you understand. Because there's always more beneath the surface of the newspaper story, giving us the hard facts, or sometimes not even that. But it is the news, and underneath it are people living and suffering sometimes. We don't get a lot of good news, do we? It doesn't sell, I guess, in the newspapers. But here is another wartime poem, you might say, and it's called The Fate of Icons, and it comes from a news report about mobs attacking Civil War statues. This is in our own country. Yes, you'll all remember that. I've watched this park for 100 years and seen the slender ladies in long skirts, men in straw hats, pits, and rampant children. I'm seated here on a bronze mare and a pedestal of stone. My companion a block away down the green, an old West Point classmate, his sword raised, as if leading a charge, as once he did. I watched yesterday as his horse and he were toppled by a rabble of gelded boys, girls with tattooed arms, and a woman standing on the horse's haunch waving a Confederate battle flag and then setting it afire. A hateful cant arising from her throat. They came for me. But night was broaching, and I endured a bit of spittle in the odd rock before they swept down the walk and disappeared. That night, my mount daintily stepped from the pedestal, and we trotted off, noting as we did that silent senators and judges, governors, justices, and common soldiers, mounted and on foot, joined us, and we all made for the woods, to deep ravines full of brush and brambles, the same land we fought over long ago. If the mob returns to the park in the glorious morning full of coffee spunk, activated by bullhorns and organizers, the lawn will be calm and curious, inhabited by pigeons, faintly unhappy that not even the rich and proud are offering crumbs today. I wrote that poem back in 2018. I guess that's when the mobs were enjoying life by attacking Civil War statues. But they've given that up. I want to read another poem now that is very close to me, because it's about my boyhood best friend. And his name was Glenn Morrison. And this is called Glenn's Wall. Gleaming in the skittish sun, the ground-sunk monument is one with our only world and all that's in it. We sat near each other in 3 schools growing up. He an athlete and smart. I smart enough, but not so game. Worked together washing dishes at a Girl Scout camp. 2 vacations. Shared an old army tent at night. Sang over the dishes. Cleaned the floors. Rampantly mowed the grounds in the all too brief Iowa summer. That was where he saved me when I swam into deep water. Couldn't find bottom coming back. Then, off to college, we parted. He to Annapolis, I to the Stanford coast. And on vacations, we talked of lovers. He flew and fought in Nam. They never found him. When his plane fell in the godforsaken jungle. One day, I found his name and we talked. The marble throbs with many stories and muted memories live and speak, gleaming in the skittish sun. The ground-sunk monument is one with our lonely world and all that's in it. The monument, of course, is in Washington, D.C., and it's worth a trip to Washington just to see that. Just to see that one thing, that monument. And it'll have the name of Glenn Morrison on it. Thank you for your attention. That's it for today. I hope you'll enjoy the weather that's nice and sunny and pleasant